Stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent.
Hide in plain sight.
Never compromise the Brotherhood.
Let these tenets be branded upon your mind. Follow them and be uplifted. Break them at your peril.
Welcome fellow gamers to another technical analysis, this time of the long-suffering Assassin's Creed from Ubisoft. Yes, we are now on patch 4 across all versions, and how does it fare? Well, at this point the PC version isn't released, or at least it wasn't when I did this video, so I'll do the PC version once that patch becomes available. But here you can see the Xbox One version running day 1 patch, so this is how it ran after you did the first day's patch, and you can see that the game performs pretty poor overall once you're in a crowd or in cutscenes. The cutscenes are the perfect cinematic, hovering around the 23-24 frames per second. Not ideal, but obviously if you want the cinematic experience, it's bang on the money. When you're in the game, you can see the frame rate in the middle of a crowd or when you're fighting can generally hover around 25 to 22 frames per second. It's not great, it doesn't perform well. Even on rooftops, it's nowhere near a lock 30. It dips around the 28 when you're not looking at crowds. But once you walk near a crowd, you get a good view. You can see that the frame rate dips and drops. The PS4 version pre-patch, so this is the day 1 disc version, this basically has an unlocked frame rate. So there's points in the game where you can get it up to near enough 60 frames, where you can see me climbing the tower after a battle, it moves up the frame rate. You can see that once you're in a cutscene, it's averaging around 28, so it's doing better in cutscenes with less work on it on the PS4, but that obviously makes sense with the GPU difference between the two machines and the same settings and resolution. You can see the frame rate on the cutscenes jumps up to about 35 on low points, but it doesn't really mean much.
Ow! Focus, pisspot.
What the hell is going on out there?
Citizens are restless. Keep an ear out. Opportunity might just come knocking soon.
In the game, it's exactly the same. It hovers around 22, 23. You can see in the middle of crowds when you're running through the streets or when you're in a fight. The game just seems to bog down and slow down, and it's not ideal experience at all. With the unlocked frame rate on the PS4, it is a little bit better because on rooftops you can get around 35 frames per second, which makes it a little bit smoother, but it doesn't make that much of a difference. But the cutscenes generally run a few frames per second better on the PS4 than the Xbox One. With the unpatched PS4 version, it hovers around 35ish in the air, but on the ground you're dipping down to 25, 23 when you're walking around, not really doing much at all. And it only gets worse when things are going on and getting a little bit hectic, as you see here. Once you get into a fight and a battle, it just gets that little bit more chuggy. Again, the Xbox One version, once you're up in the air, it tends to run a good solid 30 no matter where your draw distance is. But once you're back down on the ground, it then drops down to mid 25s, low 24s. But it does seem a little bit more stable in some areas, and that's because basically, it's clear as day, the Xbox One version has had the most work done on it, and that seems to be the case even up to this patch. Now we move to the patch 4 that came out yesterday or the day before. I can't remember exactly when it came out, but you can see now on the Xbox One, the first thing that's been improved without shadow of a doubt is the cutscenes. You can see now that they're running around a pretty much solid 30 frames per second on the Xbox One, and the PS4 seems to follow suit. You can see now that there's no dips, there's no drops, there's only 1 or 2 frames here and there. It's not going to make a huge amount of difference. It's pretty much a locked 30 in cutscenes, and you'll notice that as you're playing the game. So that makes the whole experience for the cinematic side a lot better. In the game, well, yeah, they have made improvements. It's definitely improved. General play when you're walking around the town, as you see here on the Xbox One, it just doesn't dip. You run at pretty much a locked 30 frames per second. You can have little fights, it all seems to work well, but once you get into crowds, the frame rate does take another dip, and I don't care what Ubisoft say, it might not be the crowds, in fact I'm pretty sure it's not the actual drawing of the crowds, but once you get to a scene where there's lots of CPU work going on, loading of data, streaming of data, whatever it is, it definitely causes dips. You can see here, once I get into the crowd, I'm dropping back down to my 24s, 25s, 26s. It's not a huge amount of difference, give or take a frame or two. It's not a huge difference, but general play is definitely improved. If you're running on the rooftops and you're pretty much high up and you can just see people in the distance like here, you can see the frame rate is perfectly smooth and no problem. And the PS4 is identical. You can run around the rooftops now, you're getting pretty much a locked 30 frames. It is capped at this point once you've patched it. And it's smooth and it runs really well. But once you get back into the crowds here on the like-for-like details, you can see that both of them now are operating at pretty much the same frame rate. For as near as damn it as I can get identical sequences here, I can't see any difference at all. I've mimicked the cutscenes, they're the same, and give or take a few frames on each, they're pretty much identical there. And here in the gameplay you can see that it doesn't really make much of a difference one to the, they're about the same. The worst point they seem to dip down to now is about 24, 25. Overall they seem to have worked out some of their general play, open play, but they seem to have still memory leaks, it looks like to me, because the longer you play the kind of worse the performance can get. Overall, the patch does make a difference, and it does improve the general play of the game. It does feel smoother overall. The only difference now is when they do dip to 24, 25 in the middle of a crowd, it does stand out even more than it used to, because the frame rate is now more solid outside of these areas. But overall, it's an improvement. It's not fixed. I don't think it'll ever be fixed because there's just too much wrong with the game. On this scene on the Xbox One, it kind of just pauses for 2 or 3 seconds before carrying on as normal, whereas on the PS4 it just judders its way through. You can also see bits in the cutscene where people disappear before the background does, the scene draws in before the flames do. It's definitely in a state that is probably around alpha, I would imagine, or thereabouts. It's, like I said before, it's 6 months away. They're never going to patch all these bugs out in the time they've got. They'd have to be patching this way beyond Christmas, and I just can't see that happening. I imagine that this is the best they're going to hit with this, maybe one more small patch. But overall, the performance is around the level you would have thought it would have been when it launched, so certainly from the videos. It's not ideal, but it's around 25-ish frames, most of the time 30. And this average scene that we've looked here, it's averaging at 28 frames per second. So it's not that bad, and it's certainly better than it was, but it is in isolated areas. There's still bad bits in the game. There's still heavy areas where it dips down to 24s, 25. So don't expect this patch to be completely fixed, but it does make a difference. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I'm going to let some more video play out now and you can just watch some of the comparisons on the frame rate. As always, if you enjoyed this or any of my other content, then please hit that like and sub button. It really helps me immensely and I appreciate each and every one of you that does. As always, you guys and girls take care, kill hard, run fast, and I'll see you soon on the next one.
You won't get away!
Merci bien.